live?
We are live. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone who's joining us, and good evening, Joe. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I'm here. So I'm excited for this conversation. It should be a good one. I'm Pastor Brian, by the way, and this is Pastor Joe. I know, yeah, and we're here to talk about the sermon on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't know. We could do the topic of love every Sunday and would never run out of things to talk about. That's
You
my.
love this series, don't you?
I do, um, because as a worship leader, so many things are about how are we informed as a congregation to work together and not separate. I mean,
Mm.
that's changed my heart, you know,
Hmm.
changed my heart, oh God, um, and you know, the same the same love. There's so many things that are. If God didn't love us, if that foundation wasn't there,
Right.
then would Christ have come to earth? Would he have died on a cross? None of that stuff would have happened without the foundation of love. And so, yeah, love this. I love the conversation, not to be, not to overuse a term there. It's just so important to me and I think so necessary.
Yeah, I've had a lot of good responses for it. In fact, I've had a request for a bundling it all up to make it a gift to give to other people. So I'm like, okay, well, wonderful. I'm glad it's helping people. It's challenging, I find. Yeah, because every week I feel like I'm hitting people with a sledgehammer on how they're not loving. Um,
Yeah.
and I think I wanted to start with just a reminder that as we look at these things and we look at how high the standard is, let it remind you of your need, that you're not good enough and you just never will be. And it isn't okay, but it is okay because Jesus was the standard for us. So just the reminder that this should drive you to, I desperately need the forgiveness. I need the righteousness of Christ because I can't do it on my own.
Yeah.
So just to remind ourselves of that, yeah, we need to repent. Yeah, we need to see that and go, I need to be different. Sure. But as long as it's not, it does, I always worry that it's going to push people into moralism, that really the message is just be good. Like,
Yeah.
no.
There definitely are times for nuance in a conversation and times when nuance isn't necessary. But this is, gosh, if Christian culture ever had a growing edge, it's this. It's looking at yourself, recognizing where we're falling short, not knocking ourselves, not excuse the term, but there's skipping self-flagellation and just acknowledge where we're falling short. You don't have to be defensive about it. Just,
Yeah.
um, you can be convicted and not defensive at the same time. I think we miss that. Uh,
Right. If you know that you're still loved.
yeah,
Yeah, that God still loves you as you are. There's no reason to feel bad about not meeting his standards or loving enough. It's just oh, okay. God, thank you that I'm forgiven. Help me to be different.
yeah,
Yeah. Help me to be different. Thanks.
yeah,
It's to be so we talk about the issues this last week. Um, the points of the sermon were love is not rude or boastful. It is not selfish. And I try to wrap it all up into it's not selfish. Um, rude is an interesting one to me. I feel like it's underplayed, even though I know I talked about it a lot. I feel still like it's a very underplayed problem. this being disrespectful, unthoughtful, thinking about how your actions and your words, how they impact other people, and how that can be really offensive. And I don't think we think about that. But it all gets down to this: I'm thinking about me, and I'm not really thinking about you. So
Yeah.
that and the same thing with the boasting. We know what boasting is, and there's so many subtle ways we boast. So
I gotta
that's kind of
say,
what I got at.
that one there, the whole boasting, man. And we talked about this before the service on Sunday. That's something that I I feel like I have to navigate a lot. Uh,
Hmm.
and I'll give you an example, and this is a boast at the same time. So I just want to prepare everybody for this. Okay.
Okay.
Um, the past couple months have been really stressful for me for a reason that most people would go, that's silly. And that is, I have been the assistant coach on a basketball team. I only did it because nobody else stepped up. I like to help
Mhm.
out on these kind of things. But I decided I was going to take a season off, and then the coach couldn't be there for the last 3 weeks.
I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't? Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's stressful.
So the tournament that was this weekend, I mean, I was having nightmares. I was waking up and I couldn't sleep because I was just super stressed about it.
Wow.
Uh, and then I just couldn't wait for Saturday to come and go because Saturday was the end of season tournament. And my team won the tournament.
Yay.
Right.
That's exciting.
It is. And I didn't really share that because I'm like, okay, for me, it's a relief, but it's a boast at the same time. It had very little to do with me other than I showed up and, I was present. I'm really proud of the boys, really proud of what they did and what they accomplished. But I spent a lot of time going, how do I share this in a way that's not boastful? You know,
Hmm.
uh, because I don't look at it as an accomplishment anything I did. I walked alongside this group of young men as they accomplished this thing. Um, it's hard to parse those things. I feel like that whole, and at the same time, I'm like the fact that I'm trying to figure that out suggests that I'm not off base completely. It's like I care enough
No.
to think about it. That's just the way I think about it.
You know, and we talked about this a little bit. When is it celebrating and when is it boasting?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in my mind, there's two things that goes with it. One is that again, are you being selfish in it, or are you thinking about them? Because celebrating is, hey, I'm really joyful about this. I'm happy about this, and I want to share that. I want you to have my joy. Um, and sometimes people won't take the news. They can't enter into that joy for a variety of reasons. Um, and so thinking about how are they going to respond to that, like celebrating, hey, I'm pregnant with a person who just lost their baby is not a thoughtful thought, is not thought.
Yeah.
That's not a helpful thing, But on the other hand, it could be a really joyful thing because maybe the person you're sharing with is also pregnant. So now they're like, oh, we're doing this together. So now it becomes a joyful thing. The other thought was, and you did it. You said you reflected it on someone else. It's really the boys. They did it, and so it reminds me of Paul when he says, I thank my God for you. Now, he's kind of boasting in the sense of, look, I brought you guys to faith. This is great. But what he's really he's thanking that God has done this in their lives. He's celebrating them. So I think again, I think it's this selfish thing. That's just my thoughts about it. Yeah.
Well, let's
Don't you
talk.
don't you think that's something along those lines?
I do. Um, yeah, I think that may be one of the benefits of being a shepherd to some degree, is that if you do it right, it's not about you. It's about
Mm,
celebrating the people that you are shepherding, right?
yeah.
So if things are going well in our congregation, it may be a reflection on you as a shepherd, as a pastor. It's also primarily a reflection of the changing of hearts and you know, you provide a model and they execute upon that. And it's, yeah, how do we, I think it's important as individuals that we recognize where we have added value and to give ourselves some credit for that with,
Hmm. Yes.
and not too much. And not too much.
It's that humility piece. You don't degrade yourself, but you don't overinflate yourself either.
Yeah.
You see yourself accurately. Yes. Yes, you did do some great things. You enabled them to succeed on Saturday. You
Yeah.
didn't get in the way. And maybe it was because were already taught everything they needed. You didn't need to tell them anything new, or maybe you just remind them of stuff that you both have been told, and then cheerlead them as they do their thing. I mean, that is something,
Yeah.
but they did it. So it's like, yes, I'm excited for you. That's a huge accomplishment, you know.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I gathered him up at the end and I said, I mean, can we have a group hug? I'm so proud of you.
Oh,
Because,
that's so you.
oh, I know, they're seventh graders. I'm like, and they were kind enough to accommodate me on that. So,
But that's a big accomplishment. So,
well, here's an example. There's I'm fairly certain that this family is not paying attention to this podcast.
good.
But there's a boy I've been coaching since he was in the third grade, and we
Mm,
went to a game one time, and I had to give him a ride because his parents were they couldn't, they had too many other things going on. They just asked if somebody could take him, so I took him, and he spent the whole time there talking about how awesome he is, and the whole way back talking about how awesome he is. And by the way, this is a kid who I have great affection for. And my affection for him has only grown over the years as I know who he is, I know his family. But on the way back, I was just like, dude, let somebody else boast on your behalf. Stop boasting
yes.
for yourself because it really undermines what,
Right.
right? I was thinking about Jack. And wrestling is a very individual sport that is scored as a team, kind of like track. And if Jack does an amazing job, it's much more powerful if you, as his dad or his coach or other parents, boast on his behalf and talk about, wow, how skilled he
Yeah.
is, how hard he works. All that stuff is it's so much more meaningful when it doesn't come from the subject.
Yes. What I love about this thinking what we're saying is practice boasting of other people. Don't boast yourself. Try to sing the praises of other people, how amazing they are.
Yeah.
Oh, because I mean, yeah, it's nice to say how good you are. I get that. I do understand why, but isn't it so much better to have somebody else say it?
Well, yeah. And I think it fosters a culture of positivity, of affirmation, where,
Hmm.
like Jan at church, when she shows up, it really brightens up my Sunday because
Yeah.
she's such a positive force. She's a
Hmm.
fierce worshiper. She's got a great sense of humor. There's so
Yeah.
many things that I love about her. She didn't have to tell me that. But I love the opportunity right now for people who don't know who Jan is to talk about how
And
awesome she is.
and hopefully she'll get on my podcast, Church Stories, because I've asked her and she's not ready yet.
Fair
I
enough.
know you're listening, Jan,
I wasn't
because I
thinking.
want to hear you let the world see how wonderful you are. But how about rude?
Oh gosh. Okay, yeah.
I know.
This is really the one I wanted to talk about tonight.
Oh, really? Good.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to acknowledge my own challenges with boasting, but gosh, the whole rude thing is something, man, if we have a growing edge in terms of how we love as Christians, the whole topic of rude is a huge one
Huge.
because we project our own expectations of culture on other people
Yeah.
and we don't take the time to understand what their culture says.
Even within America.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not just one culture in America. Oh my gosh, even within different generations, different. There's a different culture from downtown Portland than there is to Aurora.
Seriously, today I was talking to a woman in Grenada, and she was talking about the culture from island to island. And I said, let me just tell you that I live in the Portland metropolitan area, and if you go 20 miles south to where my church is in Aurora, it's a completely different culture. So I mean, it really is.
There are distinct cultures, yeah, and that kind of sensitivity to how your words are being taken and saying it's not about me. I want to do what's not going to be distasteful to you is man, you just got to really put yourself in neutral there and think about them. So I think about how many ways that we're rude. And it just blows my mind. I
Or,
wish we would. Wish Christians would study how to be polite.
well, but on the other side, we also have to be careful about how easily we are offended. Um,
Well, yes.
and I say that, I'm going to share a story. And I probably told you this before. I don't think I've shared it on the podcast. Vanessa and I lived in Seattle about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And we went to school together at there's a little community college. And Vanessa was working toward her master's, and I was still working toward my bachelor's. I'll be working on that for a long time. We were in a class together. I can't remember what the class was. And Vanessa at some point had referred to somebody as Oriental. And that person in the class, she didn't refer to a specific person in class, she just used that term. And a person in class got really, really offended. And
Yeah.
the thing is if you understand Vanessa's heart, it wasn't that she intended to offend. She just didn't know that
Right.
that was possibly an offensive term
No, of course
to
not.
use, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that if, culturally, Vanessa came from Texas and didn't have a lot of, Seattle has got just a very rich Asian community there. If you
Hmm.
grew up in Portland or Seattle, that might be really apparent. And so I think we also have to be careful that if somebody offends without intending to offend, right? Their intention is not to be rude. They aren't saying it's about me, I'm not imposing my culture on you. Then we have to give some grace there. Like, oh, you didn't know any better. Like I try not to get offended when people take the Lord's name in vain, right? If it comes from another Christian, then I'm like, what are we doing here? Right?
Because you're trying to be kind to them. You're trying to help them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And we live in a culture. It kind of goes without saying that everybody is super easily offended right now.
Yeah.
I mean, ridiculously so. And we need to not be that way. We need to assume. See, so okay. Let me use your example.
Okay.
You're right. Vanessa's heart is not to be offensive. Absolutely. She's one of the most respectful people I know. She's amazing. Okay. But sometimes rudeness is just simply they ignorance. It can be just big ignorance.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is thoughtlessness.
Right.
Either way, whether it's ignorance or thoughtlessness, we as Christians need to be giving them the best motives in that and forgive them.
Yeah.
And just say, even if I'm just going to assume you didn't get it. And let's say they go, yeah, no, I meant it. Yeah, like, okay, well, I forgive you anyhow and move on, because
Yeah.
that's what we're going to talk about this coming week, because it doesn't help to be offended. That doesn't, oh, yeah, I don't know if I'm making any
No, you
sense.
do. Let me. I'm going to throw out something. This is something some people may perceive as silly. When I used to work up in Vancouver, Washington, so I had like a 35, 45-minute commute every day. And if I had a challenging meeting that day, because I often would, I have to deliver some difficult news to people, I would practice certain sayings to kind of help enter into that conversation. And I would suggest that we think about that when we are concerned that somebody has said something to offend us.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you that when you first start practicing this, it feels silly. I just want to own that because it felt silly to me. But to say something like, "Wow, what you just said, that really, I don't think you offended. Did you mean it this way? Because it really hurt my feelings, or I received it this way," and to explain that and doing something like that, and I practice sayings like that. Gosh, this is what I heard. Is that what you meant? Um,
Yeah.
and gives them somebody an opportunity to go, "Oh gosh, no," or right?
Right.
Gosh, I didn't mean that at all. Okay, oh good.
Right.
And doing something like that, you get to know each other better, and that actually starts to develop trust. Like, hey, I just
Yeah.
want to check in because, yeah.
Now, I will say, with all of this, we're jumping the gun,
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
because those points are coming up.
okay. I will resist.
They are, with things like it always hopes, it always believes the best in people. This is, yes, and always doesn't keep a record of wrongs. That's coming in the next 2 weeks. So, man, we're right on track.
Oh, good.
So,
Well, so I've got a question for you though. Coming back to rude.
yes.
So, how would you, if you knew or had a suspicion, like you were going into, let's say you were going to teach at a church in downtown Portland, what would you do to prepare to understand the culture? Or if you were going to preach in, um, let's say, Ireland, Catholic Ireland,
Okay.
how would you
It's a little
prepare?
easier when it's clearly cross cultural.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the things you do is there's plenty of places you can go on the interweb that will give you what's polite and what's rude in a given culture, and it's worth knowing.
Yeah.
Um, if it's downtown Portland, you talk to the pastor and say, is there anything I should know about about how I dress, anything I should be talking about, not talking about, so, yeah, those kinds of things. But even in America, I think and I said that earlier a little offhandedly. I think it is helpful for us Christians to just take a little time and just refresh ourselves what is polite currently in America.
Hmm.
Um, because some of us were raised very politely and some of us weren't. And we don't, and sometimes we forget. And I listed a few of them on Sundays, but that's what I would say is just educate yourself. And it's not hard to do. Um, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question,
No, it's
but
good. But it prompted something else, actually, which is Northwest United States has a reputation for passive aggressiveness. That, I will pretend like it doesn't offend me when it really does. And then
mm,
that offense will inform my interactions with that person in the future or inform my interactions about that person in other areas. And so some people might
mm,
argue that to be rude is just an interpretation of being blunt. And I'm reading a book right now called Radical Candor about a similar topic, which is, where do you cross the line from being honest in a loving way and honest and a jerk?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. And you know what I think about some of all of this? Sometimes, and there's a lot of times, where being more godly is, man, it works on some deep heart things, but sometimes it's just simple practical. All you have to do is learn how to be more polite and you're more loving. Anybody can do that. You just got to want to,
Yeah.
but so that's the first thing. The other thing, I knew a guy that he could deliver the worst news to someone. You're fired, you have to leave today, and they will end up going, boy, it was sure nice working for you. Thanks for telling me. This was the greatest day at all. How does he do that? And other people would say the same thing, and they're just deeply hurt and offended. But Dave, this guy named Dave, could be blunt, and everybody thought it was the kindest thing. And I don't know how he did it. So maybe you need to help me.
Well,
How can I be more blunt?
I'll let you know when I get deeper into the book.
Okay.
But it's certainly something that there's a quadrant that it introduces, and you have one quadrant is called ruinous empathy, which is, I'm not going to tell you where you're screwing up because I love you so much that I don't want to offend you. And
Oh, that's not helpful.
that's not helpful, right?
No, that's not kind either, actually.
No, it's ultimately not. It's almost, I would say there's a cowardice that's associated with that.
Oh, right.
And that's something that I need to work on, right? So
Yeah.
where I see, gosh, I think I could help this person by sharing this information, but I'm concerned that I'm going to make them feel bad, or I'm not going to deliver it in the right way. And so I'll err on the side of empathy rather than err on the side of unkindness, right? So you're
Right.
just trying to find the right balance between truth, kindness, all those things. So this all brings me around, if you'll excuse me, to social media.
Can I say one last thing about that?
Yes, please.
Because I don't want to forget. I want you to. Wait, no, we're going to go over a little bit. One of the issues that people, I feel like I've never addressed is when and how do you actually call people out on their sin? And I think I want to say a couple of words on that. It's not because you're trying to make them hurt or feel bad about it. That's selfish. I think it's when you can do it because you're trying to help them and you're trying to bless them. But there's also the side of often you don't need to say anything. I think a lot of times love covers over sin. And it's like, yeah, and it takes a lot of wisdom to know the right moment and the right time. Because, anyways, that's all I wanted to say.
No, but
sometimes there is a time to say it, and sometimes there's not.
But let's ignore what I was going to say, because I really want to address what you're saying, because it makes
Okay.
me think of something. I'll provide an example. A few years ago, Vanessa decided she wanted to be more fit, right? That it was something that she really wanted to focus on.
Okay.
And I bought her a Fitbit. And I bought it because I knew what her goals were, where she wanted to go with that. But there may be people in your life that are doing something that's just unhealthy, right? Where, because you love them, you want to share, you want to say, hey, you need to be doing better. We have a mutual friend who's, and his wife is not healthy in terms of the way she eats, lack of exercise, and a lot of stuff. And I know it bothers him, but he won't say anything because he's concerned he'll come across as shallow. But to your point, if your intention is, hey, I love you, and I know you're not happy, and what can I do to support you in this? That's
important. That last line. it's not I'm condemning you. It's, look, I'm doing this because I want to help you. I want to serve you. How do I serve you in this?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's huge. Like with Vanessa is, I want to support you. Would a Fitbit be helpful? Because I'd love to bless you with that. You know, in this case, you didn't need to because you knew her well enough. But yeah,
Right. But I
yeah,
didn't. It was one of those things where I wanted to be careful. It's like, listen, it's
because you could offend.
yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
because don't you think sometimes we don't need to bring it up because they're not ready to hear it,
Or they already know. What
or
one
they
of
already
one
know.
of my favorite lyrics is a Jackson Brown song where he says, "Don't remind me of my failures. I have not forgotten them." If
Oh, that's so good.
It's a great lyric, and the thing is that if the person that you want is already aware of where they're struggling, you bringing
You
it
don't
up
need, yeah.
isn't helping. It's just, you know,
I mean, maybe you might be able to bring it in the right time at the right angle to be able to say, I want to help you. Maybe.
yeah.
But, oh,
It,
yeah.
this is the balance, the challenge of being human and loving people is that you get, if you truly love people, it's hard because you have to navigate some stuff. If you're okay being rude and unloving, man, it's
Yeah.
carte blanche. You get to do whatever you want.
And remember back when I was talking about in the wheel and that final thing where it's obedience but wise, this is what I'm talking about. When do you speak? When do you not speak? Can you tell where they're at? Is this good for them to hear it? I'm just like, good Lord, I don't know. But I think the goal is, whether we're talking on social media or we're talking in person, you need to be thinking about how this is going to be taken by the person
Yeah,
that you're going to say. And especially online, don't say something online that you would never say in person,
yeah,
because a lot of people feel very bold online to just be obnoxious,
yeah.
and
And
it's
and
not helpful.
and communication is so much of that is visual. It's the tone of your voice. It's
And you don't
not
get any
just
of that.
text. And you don't get any of that on social media. So you may think you're
No.
being funny, lighthearted, whatever. And even if the person that you're
Gentle.
sharing it with gets it, somebody else who sees that may not and be offended on behalf of,
Oh my gosh, yes.
right? So don't.
Just don't.
Yeah, take a
You
moment
know,
and meet them in person and go, "That was funny. Thanks for sharing that." Or
right. In fact, I mean, that's just a generally good thing. Anytime you have something harsh that you do need to say to somebody, say it to them in person, not even on the phone. Talk to them in person.
yeah,
Because first of all, you'll hear all the nuance. You can work through all the issues involved much faster. I mean, yeah. So rude. And unfortunately, it's so rude that the time is up, that we have to be done.
yeah,
Because this coming week is all going to be about, it's going to be about forgiveness. And it's going to be, and I'm really struggling with this nuance of irritable, provoked, and just letting you guys know that I don't know how to interpret that. There's at least 3 ways. So there's a little teaser for next Sunday.
I'm looking forward to 9:30 Sunday morning when we sit down and we chat about this for the service.
All right.
Well, have a good night, sir. I'm going to go have some chicken pot pie.
All right. You have a good night. We'll talk to you later.
All right.